Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Josh and this is Practical Apologetics. On this channel we talk about Christianity, evidence, philosophy, theology, and how to think through difficult questions in a practical and understandable way. And today I want to talk to you about something that every human being experiences: morality. Because whether someone is religious or not, most people live as though some things are truly right and others are truly wrong. And I think that raises a really important question. Where does that come from? I want you to imagine for a minute that you're playing Monopoly for the very first time. You never played any board games growing up. Someone gives you the very basic idea. Roll the dice, move your piece, buy property, and most importantly, try not to go bankrupt. That's literally all you know. Now imagine that halfway through the game, someone gets up to go to the bathroom. While they're gone, you quietly take extra money from the bank. And you justify it. After all, the objective is not to go bankrupt, right? And taking the money seems like a natural way to win. Here's the question. Even if you'd never played Monopoly before, why would you know that was wrong? Nobody needed to explain every possible rule to you. You didn't need a long lecture on Monopoly ethics. You would already feel that you were cheating. And honestly, the fact that you waited until nobody was watching in the first place proves the point even more. Because there are things human beings do in private, specifically because we already know they're wrong. This is a general idea that C.S. Lewis talks about in the book Mere Christianity. And I think he makes a really profound observation. What's interesting is that these ideas became especially important in the years surrounding and following World War II, which is when he was writing the book. People had just witnessed the Holocaust and the atrocities of Nazi Germany. They were forced to wrestle with a difficult question. Were those things merely socially unacceptable, or were they actually objectively evil? Lewis points out that humans are constantly appealing to some standard of fairness. People say things like, "That's not fair. You shouldn't have done that. You promised. That's my seat. You cheated." Even people who disagree morally still act like morality is real. They don't argue that fairness doesn't exist at all. They argue that someone violated it. I remember moments as a kid where I instinctively hid things. Not because I had a full philosophical understanding of morality, but because somewhere deep down I already knew it was wrong, even though no one told me. There's a reason children hide things. There's a reason we look over our shoulder before doing certain things. There's a reason guilt exists, even when nobody finds out. People often say morality changes over time. But when we say a society has morally improved, we're assuming there's a real standard we're improving towards. If morality was merely invented by cultures, then no society could actually become better or worse. It would just become different. But that's not how humans talk. We don't look at things like genocide, slavery, or human cruelty and say, well, that was just their cultural preference. We say that was wrong. For example, we celebrate the abolition of slavery as real moral progress. Not merely just a change in taste or opinion. Now, obviously, people don't always follow this moral compass. I ignore it sometimes. You probably ignore it sometimes. I think everybody does. But failing to follow a rule doesn't mean the rule itself isn't real or doesn't exist. In fact, our guilt often proves we know the standard exists. As humans, we seem to have two competing impulses inside of us. On one side, we have the survival instinct, self-preservation, fear, desire, anger. that like natural fight or flight. That part makes perfect sense from a naturalistic perspective. But then there's this other voice, this quieter thing inside us that tells us we should do what's right, even when it costs us something. Sometimes the moral thing directly opposes self-interest and self-preservation. And yet we still admire courage, honesty, and sacrifice. If morality were merely one instinct among many, then it wouldn't really make sense for it to judge the other instincts. But that's exactly what it does. Page 10 of Mere Christianity, Lewis writes, "Now this thing that judges between two instincts, that decides which should be encouraged, cannot itself be either of them." And I think that's incredibly profound. From a Christian perspective, the flesh and survival instinct may explain part of human behavior. But conscience often calls us to rise above instinct rather than obey it. At this point, somebody might object and say, well, morality is just evolution. Humans evolved cooperative behavior because it helped survival. But even many atheist thinkers like Sam Harris argue that some ways of living are objectively better or worse for human flourishing. So the debate isn't usually whether we experience moral obligation. It's how we explain it. I personally struggle with reducing morality to mere social conditioning, because even very young children show signs of conscience long before they understand philosophy or social systems. If morality is only survival programming, then why do we admire people who sacrifice their own survival for others? Why does guilt feel real even when nobody finds out? And why do humans across cultures consistently appeal to justice, fairness, and good versus evil? Lewis's argument isn't that every culture agrees on every moral detail. His argument is that humanity behaves as though a real moral law exists. And deep down, I think most of us know exactly what he means. We all live like certain things are truly wrong, not just personally disliked, but actually wrong. I believe that moral law points towards a moral lawgiver, not just rules, but an actual source, not just instincts, but meaning. And maybe that uncomfortable voice inside us that says, you know better than that, is pointing to something much bigger than just social conditioning. Maybe it's pointing to the fact that we were created with a real awareness of good and evil. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. It really helps the channel grow. And if you have any thoughts, disagreements on what I said, apologetics questions, or topics you'd like me to cover in future videos, please leave a comment down below. I genuinely love to interact with you guys. Thank you again for watching, and God bless.